What's up, guys? You're listening to The Soundtrack, a podcast discussing film, television, and video game music with the fans, geeks, and super freaks. Hey, I hope everyone's had a great December. It's your host, Zack. I got another great episode for you. I'm so excited about this one. This episode is going to be all about Star Wars, and it's going to be a little bit different than the previous episodes have been. Usually I do the first part by myself, and then I bring in a special guest, but I'm going to actually have two guests. And my first special guest is going to help me discuss the main topic, which is all the music of Star Wars, pretty much. A special episode since Rogue One came out halfway through this month. And so my friend, a friend of mine, Alex Reed, is going to be on. A friend from high school. He's a screenwriter now. And probably the biggest Star Wars fan I know. He knows even more about it than me. And he's very knowledgeable about the music, too. So I'm really excited to have him on. And then my second guest is going to be my friend Tim Valentine, who's coming to visit me. He lives in Texas normally, but one of my best friends, Tim Valentine, we go way back. Yeah, he's visiting, so I figured I'd just have him on my show just so we can do some more geeking out about Star Wars, because we grew up on that stuff, especially playing all the video games and stuff like that. So I'm really excited for this episode. It's going to be a lot of fun, and I hope you guys are all big Star Wars fans too. I think this will be a really good one. And I just want to make one more announcement really quick. This podcast is now available on TuneIn, tunein.com. You'll find the soundtrack in their directory. In addition to Blueberry and on my website and iTunes. So I'm working hard to try to get my podcast up in more places for your convenience. So hopefully TuneIn is another place where you like to get your podcasts. So I'm happy to announce that I'm on that website as well. So happy listening. All right, so on to the main topic of episode number 6. Here we go. I'm really excited to have with me for the main topic this time, as opposed to just being a special guest that comes on in the second half. I've got a very good friend of mine, Alex Reed, is on, and it's nice to have a new guest on for a change. I've had kind of some repeats already, but it's nice to have somebody new in the fold here. So welcome, Alex. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks, Zach, and hello, audience.
Hello. Alex is also a big supporter of my podcast, so I appreciate him coming in and
subscribe in iTunes, everyone.
Yeah, thank you for
or wherever you get your podcasts.
Thanks for the plug. I'm working on more places. It's getting there, but yeah. So Alex and I we went to high school together, and Alex has gone on to CU Boulder first.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and then Chapman University for grad screenwriting.
Screenwriting. Mm-hmm. Nice. So Alex is a great screenwriter, director, all that stuff, and also a huge Star Wars fan. So I'm really excited for this. This is going to be a fun discussion here. So
super fun. I was telling Zach I've been looking forward to this for like days, and I've been listening to my favorite Star Wars podcast like nonstop.
Right.
Like at work, I'm like feeding papers into the shredder and just listening to Star Wars.
Yeah, and just feeling the hype for the new stuff and all
exactly.
that. Appreciate you coming in. I want to give Alex a little bit of a plug first before we started talking about Star Wars, because like I said, he's a screenwriter and all that stuff, so he's got a couple of big projects. What are you working on?
Well, sure. The first one I want to tell you about is a movie project called Deviant. And back in school, I did a play called Pentathlon, and it was directed by me and then directed again by a good friend of mine named Emmy Watkins. And last year, we had the opportunity, because our friend Tom was building a film studio in Boulder. We had the idea to make this play, now called Deviant, as a professional, as a movie, with a real budget and everything, and actors and the studio
legit.
Space. Yeah,
it's legit.
So we shot the movie last July, and we're looking for a release date sometime next year, which is when we'll start having premieres and submitting to film festivals and everything. And to follow us, you can look on Facebook and Instagram, which is @DeviantMovie. And also, it really helps if you check out our IMDb page, because the amount of views of our IMDb page is a good way for industry people to judge interest in a project. And it makes our project more likely to actually be sold next year.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So Deviant, check that out. It's coming relatively soon. And then you're also working on some web series. You've done a little bit already, but now you've got kind of a new web series coming out.
Yeah. This new project is called Unvented. It's with me and my friend Logan, and the premise is that we're roommates, and Logan is a crazy inventor who comes up with all kinds of schemes and inventions to take care of everyday problems. So we've shot 3 episodes so far, and Zack is working on a theme song for us, actually.
I am indeed.
Yeah, and we're looking to release sometime maybe a week from now. We're still debating about our release schedule, and then to sort of get a regular cycle of production going into the next year. It's called Unvented.
Unvented. And it's kind of a comedy, kind of sort of sci-fi-ish thing.
Yeah, we were kind of inspired by Rick and Morty, which is one of our favorite shows. So
Cool.
It has that sort of madcap, mad scientist feel.
I dig it. Well, Alex, it sounds great. So let's go ahead and talk about just general favorite Star Wars songs, pieces of music from just throughout the franchise, everything that we've heard so far. And
I should start out by saying that the Star Wars soundtracks were like my jam in middle school. Like I would just listen to them constantly over and over, like both the original trilogy scores and the prequel scores. So I got to know that music so well. And plus, in almost every Star Wars video game ever made features that music, just over and over remixed in various ways. So you just hear it all the time. And I might have even listened to the soundtracks more than watched the movies, to be honest.
So what would you say kind of, I kind of tried to, spread it out because it's easy to pick all songs from like one movie because there's like, even from the first movie, all those original themes are, classics, and they've been carried throughout all the movies, even until now. So I tried to kind of spread it out, spread the love a little bit, but it's up to you. I don't know. What do you think as far as like some of your favorite? You have a list of like maybe 5. I picked 5 songs.
I tried to spread it out too. Like I picked 2 kind of slower, softer pieces and 2 more action pieces, and then my one top piece is different. So if we want to start,
yeah, go ahead and share yours, and then I'll.
These 4 are kind of in no particular order, but I'll just start with my first pick is Across the Stars, which is the love theme from Attack of the Clones. And kind of, I mean, whatever you may think of the romance in Attack of the Clones, the theme and the music for it is just magnificent. It's just a sweeping, epic love theme, and it works really well. It's just its own standalone piece of music. So I just think it's a gorgeous theme that even kind of transcends. Yeah, it kind of transcends what you see on screen.
And it's great to see, because John Williams did those first 6 episodes, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, and Force
Awakens. So, it's really great to carry on that legacy. I'm glad he was able to carry on that legacy with even more memorable themes, even though we don't exactly remember the prequels as being something really special. It's nice that at least the music is still strong. And John Williams isn't necessarily one of my favorite composers, but that though the original music from the original movies, but also like being able to capitalize on that and to come up with more significant themes, especially like you said, like it's really not whatever your take on the actual love story is from the original one. It's still great music, and I think at least he held up his end of the bargain.
Oh, he did. Yeah, and at least for those first 6 episodes, John Williams tended to come up with 1 or 2 major memorable themes for each movie. Like how in Empire Strikes Back you had the Imperial March, for Phantom Menace you had Duel of the Fates, and Across the Stars was sort of his major theme for Attack of the Clones.
Right.
So each episode kind of has its own memorable theme and musical signature.
I think I've got something from it was actually episode 6. I was thinking I really like, for some reason, in episode 6, the Parade of the Ewoks and the Force Battle music kind of combined, I guess.
Yeah.
Maybe it's more so Parade of the Ewoks. That's kind of an unusual first pick for me, I guess. But
you stole one of my picks was Force Battle Concert Suite.
Okay.
Yeah, so we can talk about this for sure.
Okay, great. It's just interesting how they sound very similar. Like he took that, I think John Williams took very similar orchestration for those, even though they were kind of different different pieces of music, different parts of the movie, still that same setting. So I think there's a lot of the same language, a lot of the same material is used. between those two sections.
Yeah.
So I think it's very interesting how they kind of come together. There's a cohesion there
Yeah.
in that section of the movie, and those two themes, those two passages. It's kind of it's really interesting how they fit together. So I think that's a great. And it's kind of understated too. It's a little bit underrated as far as the score goes, because there's a lot of recognizable themes, a lot of very popular themes. So
Yeah.
and actually, you took I think I had Across the Stars on my list as well. So
Haha.
yeah, so we're still
Stealing from each other.
This is probably good. We'll go back and forth. We'll probably cover everything by the end of
Yeah.
this. But,
Hey, I have some backup picks too.
okay,
So
great.
I got plenty to talk
okay.
about.
This guy, he came prepared. See, I told you, he's on top of his game, man. I gotta watch out. But yeah, Force Battle. Anything to add about that one?
The thing about, I think
It's interesting to from a filmmaker's perspective. What do you think about?
Yeah, I was going to talk more in general about the Return of the Jedi soundtrack, because I think out of all of them, it deserves the reward for most epic soundtrack, because John Williams wrote so much music for that movie. Like, the soundtrack album is actually longer than the movie. And it
Really?
Yeah, it
that
includes
I did not know.
Yeah, it includes music he wrote for deleted scenes, and some sections were actually rescored, like the battle at the sail barge. The Force Battle Concert Suite is actually a standalone piece of music that's taking some of the music from the Battle of Endor and reorchestrating it, so it would stand on its own as a concert piece. And yeah, you can hear the arrangement is a little different in the score version of this music. But I really love those pieces, like the Ewok theme and the Concert Suite, because they're fast-paced, they're energetic, but they're also fun too.
Right.
Just fun to listen to.
They're very. Yeah, it is fun, isn't it? Like, that's what it all really comes down to, isn't it? Is that the score, even though it's underscore technically, John Williams is kind of living proof that the music doesn't necessarily have to take a back seat to the movie. It's part of the movie. So I think he really revolutionized the film soundtrack and the film industry in that regard.
Yeah, the Star Wars movies give the music a lot of room to breathe, too. Like, when you think about the way they do their space shots with these big, grand, sweeping shots of ships in space, and it leaves a lot of room for the music to make its own statement.
Do you think he meant to do that kind of that full symphonic suite was that his decision, do you know for sure, or was that just kind of a...
It probably was. I know
Sounds
that
like it. I don't want to just go ahead and assume it's like a money-making thing, but
yeah. I know that
I'm curious.
that George Lucas personally produced the very first score, A New Hope, but I think after that, John Williams started producing it himself.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I think it was just his decision to write some more music, so he would have a good piece to perform in concert.
That's kind of really goes above and beyond in that regard. So that's interesting. I'll have to check that out. I actually haven't heard that.
Especially for Return of the Jedi, he really went above and beyond. Like, it includes like background source music for the Ewok village and the tracks from Jabba's palace. It's such a broad palette for that soundtrack.
That's such a great movie too. I feel like the movie in general is a little bit underrated. Everyone talks about like Episode 5 kind of. My personal favorite movie is Episode 4. Just I don't know what just being a classic movie. I think it's the whole story is kind of, at least for that movie, is a little bit, it's more simple for my brain to follow.
It's the movie where if you want to, you can go back and watch it and forget about the whole Star Wars franchise and the fandom and everything, and just watch it as a movie.
Exactly.
It just
I agree.
So simple and pure as a movie. All right, should we move to our next pick?
Yeah, go for it. What do you got?
Let's see. Since we kind of talked about our action-y music, I'm going to go to my next sort of softer pick. Okay. And it's a short piece. It's only about maybe a minute long. It's called Light of the Force. It's from the Return of the Jedi soundtrack.
Oh, really? Okay.
This is the music that plays at the very end of the movie when Luke is burning Darth Vader's body.
Oh, right. Okay.
And this is a good opportunity, actually, to talk about John Williams' themes for Star Wars.
Okay.
And his use of leitmotif, which is a concept I was introduced to through these soundtracks, actually. And leitmotif is maybe you'd probably be able to explain this better than me. Leitmotif is a technique invented by Wagner, the famous German opera composer. And it's the technique of using a simple melody to represent a character or a setting or a situation.
Right, exactly.
And then you repeat that theme throughout the score with different orchestrations. You play it fast or slow or soft or loud.
Different permutations throughout the movie, depending on the situation.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and John
you know
Williams,
what you're talking about.
Yeah, John Williams, like, he didn't invent the technique, to be sure. It was used in movies long before him, but I think he popularized it better than any composer I can think of.
Exactly.
Yeah, like, you could probably go to the average person in the street and ask, so what's Darth Vader's theme? And they would just give you dun 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 da da dun da da.
Right. So easy, and I think the only composer to me that's rivaled that ability to transform a theme like that is Howard Shore with Lord of the Rings. To be honest, I think his there's just those themes are a little bit less recognizable. I don't know what it is about. I don't know if it's just because Lord of the Rings isn't quite as popular as Star Wars, or just the fact that music it's a little bit more complex in certain things.
It's more complex, and he tends to use his themes tend to represent larger ideas. Like, he has a Shire theme and a Mordor theme, whereas in Star Wars,
locations as opposed to characters. Maybe that's also part of it.
In Star Wars, almost every character has a theme. Exactly.
Right. Okay.
And the reason I wanted to talk about this piece, Light of the Force, specifically, is because it's my favorite rendition of one of my favorite John Williams themes, which is the Force theme. And kind of the most famous instance of this is in A New Hope. It's a piece called Binary Sunset, when Luke is walking out and he looks at the twin suns of Tatooine and he's dreaming about life.
It's a pretty iconic scene in itself.
And the scene and the theme is used throughout all of the movies to represent the power of the Force. And honestly, I think it gets a little overused as the scores go on, especially in the prequels. But the reason this is my favorite rendition is it's just so simple and soft. Like, it starts out, it's just a single French horn just playing the theme, and then the orchestra comes in and it pans up till you see the fighters in the sky and the fireworks. It's just a lovely moment, and it's a great piece of music on its own and for how it works with the images to bring the story to a close.
Definitely. That's very interesting. That's a theme that maybe doesn't come to mind like an immediately, kind of like, Darth Vader's theme kind of does. And speaking about like Darth Vader's theme, I think we were kind of talking about this before we were talking about how there's a method to everything with John Williams, and especially with Darth Vader's theme, how it's like, the melody is basically just outlining like a major triad, like a major chord. And, we tend to think like happier, like good things about like major chords as opposed to minor. So like the song's kind of in a minor key, but the melody being outlined being a major chord, it signifies, Darth Vader is actually good inside. There's still the goodness in him. And so I think that that's another thing about writing themes, is you have to be very deliberate in what you're writing. It's not John Williams was really great at, really digging into these characters and figuring out what, that's part of writing a theme, is not just something catchy, but also something
speaks to the character.
Right.
Like, what are they about?
That says something about the character, exactly.
And the other thing about that piece is it's technically called the Imperial March. So it's a march. It's meant to get you like all roused up and like ready for action. Yeah. So that makes sense that it's major.
It's interesting, like as that theme goes through all the movies, because it's used even up until up through Rogue One. It really sounds darker in certain places. Like it's not meant to be like sound good all the time. Like, it's supposed to be like really foreboding throughout the movie. It's just its application's different, but even though the original meaning may still be there, it's like how it transforms through the movie can maybe be used in darker ways, more seriously. Because in some certain ways, I think the Imperial March is kind of not the most evil sounding thing that you could, because there's there's more ways of drawing more tension and like anger and like evil.
I mean, the Emperor's theme is evil,
right?
But the Imperial March, it's just awesome.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Actually, one of the most brilliant uses of Darth Vader's theme in the Imperial March, because you were talking about it being used in different ways, is in Darth Vader's death scene in Return of the Jedi, where it's played very softly and it's played almost mournfully. Like at the moment when Darth Vader actually dies, the theme is played on a harp, just dun,
Absolutely.
dun, dun. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
so brilliant.
Interesting how like even instruments, like certain orchestration can play a huge part. That's why those music departments are so big, is because they like everybody, all these people collectively have, I mean, you know, John Williams, the director, and whoever's directing, like this it's really their brainchild, I think, but there's all these people that, you know, probably have maybe some input as far as, well, what if it was played on this, and you know, because that's the most interesting to me. Even working on your theme song right now for your web series is figuring out like what are the right instruments to use, because even like just a certain palette identifies with a certain movie, you know, and certain sound effects. I'm thinking of cartoons now, just like certain cartoons that like Ed, and Eddie. I don't know if you ever watched that, but certain like the horns and that kind of thing that they use.
Sort of like Arrested Development signature is the mandolin.
Right, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
And as it applies to Star Wars, one little piece of trivia is that these scores they're symphonic orchestral scores, and that was a deliberate choice made by George Lucas. In the 70s, a lot of sci-fi films were scored with electronic sounds, but George Lucas wanted a sound that would ground the audience in the humanity of what was happening and the reality. And the only place I can think of that actually uses synthesizers in a Star Wars score is in The Empire Strikes Back, in the scene in the cave, where it's kind of a dreamlike vision scene. So it's kind of removed from reality.
Right.
And Darth Vader pops out of the cave and it's in slow motion, and this synthesizer chord comes out of nowhere to illustrate kind of the unreality of what's happening.
Ah, interesting.
Well, we've kind of strayed off of our lists here.
Man, we're all over the place, and Alex is just nailing it so far.
What's your next pick?
Do you want to hear something else? Well, let's kind of circle back to A New Hope now, because we're kind of already jumping all over the place anyway.
Yeah.
And then also jumping to cartoons and stuff. That's my fault. I really like the ceremony music from the throne room, the Emperor's, or from the end of A New Hope.
Were you about to say the Emperor's throne room?
I don't know.
Emperor's New Groove.
I don't know. That's what I was thinking. Oh man, we've talked about that. It seems like that movie comes up in every podcast I do.
The Emperor's New Groove.
Yeah, it was in the Disney one, and then I don't know.
Anyway, the throne room music. Yeah,
throne music. Something about that I really like, just because that's all music, right? Because there's nothing else going on. It's
there's this hysterical YouTube video of these people who took the music out of that scene and just dubbed in sound effects, and it's so horribly awkward. You can hear people like coughing in the background.
What is it called? It's called
Star Wars without Williams or something like that.
Star Wars minus Williams or something like that.
Yes, that's it.
And the throne room. So I'll post a link in the description, in the episode description.
Yeah. That when I first saw that, it made me laugh embarrassingly loud in the empty, silent library.
It's just everything's overdubbed, and it really is true. The footsteps, everything about it though, is just really immaculately like pieced together.
They do like the sounds of like the leather jacket shifting.
Right.
Yeah.
People coughing in the background, and then I think at one point you even kind of hear like when Leia smiles.
Yeah, you hear her lips go like. I'm trying to do the sound.
I think something like that. It's just this really weird things, all the attention to detail. I love it. I'll post a link for that so that you guys can see that.
You'll love it, I promise.
It's fantastic. But isn't it just amazing though? Like what a difference the music makes for a movie. And
when you watch that scene in the movie, when you watch, you don't even think about it. Like you imagine there's just some band somewhere off screen playing this.
Yeah. But they're filming this, and they're it's probably totally silent, and it must have been really awkward for the acting, which is a testament to the actors that they they bring it all together, because they don't know what the final product is going to be.
They don't know what the music's going to sound like. Yeah.
So they just have to do their thing, and it all comes together. But what a great, another iconic scene. There's just so many iconic scenes from those movies.
Yeah, and that theme. Like really, when you listen to that music, all it is, it's the Force theme, but it's played in this martial, like upbeat marching style. And then at the end, it introduces a unique throne room theme.
Right.
And which actually, it's not used too often in the scores, but you can hear it actually in the end credits of Revenge of the Sith, which at the time, there weren't any new Star Wars movies going to be made as far as anyone knew. So when John Williams wrote that suite, it was kind of a farewell to the whole saga.
Felt like closure.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
So he included the throne room theme as a way to loop it back to the very beginning, the first movie.
I want to say something about that also in terms of like more of an analysis, like a true analysis, a composer's perspective. I think it's very interesting how that music and the Star Wars main theme are similarly arranged for the orchestra and kind of orchestrated. There's the themes are kind of close together. The melodies sound similar, but they also, the way the orchestra, like the orchestral response, like the response in the orchestra, like the how it's playing with the themes. So it's like you've got the statement of the theme, but then you also have the dun,
sort of
dun,
like
dun, da, da, da,
sort of like how the
very
drums
rhythmic support, like the rhythmic support is very much the same. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, like when it does the Force theme, it's like dun boom dun dun da da dun 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 dun. Yeah,
just that sort of counterpoint that's happening. It's really like taking the same ideas. It's really it's like that music is like DNA. You just kind of morph it into something. It's the same elements are there. You just kind of morph it into something else. But I just think that's very interesting and also just a great idea. It seems like too obvious to do, but really when you do it, it makes it even that much more effective. Mm-hmm. So just from a more like a composer kind of geeky musical perspective, I guess.
Totally,
there's things like that and all the themes kind of do that. Like I said, these themes get carried through the movies in different ways. So, but they generally have the same feel, even if they may be stated with different instruments or stuff like that. Like there's those certain maybe rhythmic elements are kind of the same for the most part. Not always. It doesn't have to be. It depends. But
this actually, this is making me think of my next pick actually.
Yeah.
And while we're on episode 4. My next pick it's a little piece called TIE Fighter Attack, and it's heard after they escape the Death Star, and there's an action sequence where they're battling TIE fighters, and Han and Luke are in the turrets.
Great kid, don't get cocky.
Exactly. And they even made a joke about this in Blue Harvest. They're sitting in the turret, and Peter's like doing the music. Exactly. But the reason that joke works is the music is such a huge part of that scene, and I chose this because it's just quintessential Star Wars action music.
Right.
Like the piece.
That's something unlike the ending, the throne room music. This is like during the movie. This is during the heat of battle too, kind of.
Yep.
But still, the music is center stage kind of in this scene, or alongside what's actually happening.
It has a great build too. Like there's a minute where the TIE fighters are approaching, but you can't see them, and you hear the rumbles, and the music is doing this dun 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 dun. Yeah. This tense build up.
Right.
And then it just launches into action. And what you hear mostly during this piece is the Rebel Alliance theme. Da-da-dun, 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 da-da-da-da.
Yeah.
But it's done in just full force, full blast.
And I think, that's just one of the highlights, I think, of all the soundtracks, to be honest. That I just love the Rebel, everything surrounding the Rebels. I just love everything surrounding the original trilogy music. Not to say that the prequels and Force Awakens and all that wasn't great. Which actually that brings me to my next pick. But
cool.
But yeah, just it's those types of scenes and that's when you first in that movie. I don't know if that's the first like major action, but that's like the first major space battle. That's the first chance you really get a chance to understand like TIE fighters, and that's like the staple of the Imperial forces. And
yeah, there have been some shootouts in the movie before then, but yeah, this is the first space battle.
But I mean, like if you're seeing this in 1970 and you weren't sold before, like you are sold at watching that scene, I think that maybe is where like it just all you're like, wow, man, this is like crazy space battles and all that stuff.
I don't know where it's a music podcast, but I could go on and on about the editing in that too, and in the space battles in A New Hope.
I appreciate your input on and anything outside of music that you want to,
Sure.
talk about too.
I guess if you want some editing trivia,
Sure.
A New Hope was actually edited by George Lucas's wife Marcia, and Lucas and Francis Ford Coppola, they came out of this this filmmaking tradition in the 70s, which was very radical, revolutionary, that sought to advance film as an art form. So when you actually go and look at the editing in those battle scenes in A New Hope, it's much more chaotic than you'd expect. Like in that TIE fighter attack, they're cutting from the TIE fighter pilots. They're cutting to inside. They cut to the droid shaking around. They cut to Princess Leia in the cockpit, Han and Luke in the turrets. There's so many different lines of action.
Right.
And the movie keeps them all consistent and coherent, and you know what's going on. But
almost
just
like that,
very
those
exciting.
cuts, almost like those cuts go with the music in that, like the music's up tempo, so like the cut, like the editing, it's easy to follow, but you still like it's happening. It seems to be happening in time with the music. Like it seems appropriate. You're not focused on one thing for too long. Same as the music doesn't really stay static for too long. It seems like there's every 4 measures or so, there's like a new addition to the orchestra or something changes to like, based on what's happening. So,
Yeah, and I would imagine that John Williams wrote the music to the rhythm of the cuts.
probably.
Yeah, the fact that those cuts were so dynamic and so exciting in the first place
Exactly.
contributed to the music.
That's what I think.
Yeah.
Great. So, yeah, we haven't really talked about The Force Awakens, so I want to talk. There's not much that's too memorable from that. It's interesting to hear John Williams in a later, a more current movie.
Yeah.
Even if it is a Star Wars movie, it's it's nice to hear a John Williams score. It sounds a little bit different than in his previous scores, I think, but still some great stuff to come out of there. Boy, can't you just imagine like any other like kind of a modern movie with like John Williams music? Seems like there's so many composers kind of following this like kind of a cookie cutter. Not saying like the great like the industry's best composers probably like they are able to find their own voice, but there's a lot of composers trying to reach that point that kind of follow like, I don't know, like a typical, like a formula as far as composing. It seems like everything you use is like a lot of heavy percussion, and which is great, but John Williams, and the I know that was mostly aesthetic choice too, to even do the original movies with that kind of full orchestra. But it's really interesting. It's hard to imagine like a modern movie with John Williams music, especially since like all of his inspiration. John Williams was really inspired by like Gustav Holst and the Planets and all that stuff. By the way, if you haven't heard the Planets, that symphonic suite by Gustav Holst, check that out, because there are a lot of similarities. I don't want to say like John Williams stole anything from those pieces, but listen to like the Mars movement in particular, because there's a lot of similar, at least rhythmic stuff that's happening, and like kind of chordal things.
Yeah, and the Planets has basically been the touchstone for every epic space opera score you've probably ever heard. Like even the Star Trek composers used it as inspiration.
Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that.
Actually,
it's great music, so why not?
On The Next Generation, if I'm allowed to talk about Star Trek in a Star Wars podcast, but on The Next Generation, there were 2 main composers hired at the start of the series, and they later learned that both of them had individually looked to the Planets for inspiration as for their battle and action music. It's just both of them came to the same conclusion independently.
Right. So,
and I'm sure John Williams helped with that, because he set the template in a lot of ways for.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
I think it's great to even carry on that music too, not to let that sort of fade out. It's still important in terms of history, musical history in the first place. So it's great that music still has purpose. You know? It's great that tradition is kind of carried on. But
so what Force Awakens piece did you want to talk about?
So I really actually do like Rey's theme.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the standout pieces
from that movie, because it's it sounds like it's not developed fully. Like, does that make sense? Like, because I feel like Rey, we don't know everything there is to know about Rey yet. So I feel like that theme, I don't know how to say a calming influence, but she's she's level-headed.
She's level-headed. Yeah.
She's very level-headed. So like her theme is very steady, but it's also not very
there's also something searching about it. Because she's searching for her past. She's searching for a way off the planet.
It seems distant. Like there seems to be some distance. Yeah, right. Exactly. And I really like it, and it sounds different. Like it still sounds very much like it embodies Star Wars, but it's just another new thing. It's the kind of theme where it may not jump out at you, but there's still something familiar about it.
Right. Like,
exactly.
I feel like I've heard that before, like in the score. And on the Force Awakens score more generally, I actually listened to it for the first time for this podcast, because when I watched the movie, the score didn't really jump out at me. And just as a listening experience, I found it a little underwhelming, to be honest. But I don't think I blame John Williams for that. I blame the movie. Because the movie is edited and just constructed so differently from the other Star Wars movies.
Exactly, yeah.
The action is so frenetic that there's not a lot of space for the music to breathe. So, like I talked before about how the old Star Wars movies gave the music a lot of space to breathe, like in these epic space shots. And The Force Awakens isn't like that. It has different rhythm.
I don't know if that's just because more films tend to go that direction generally anyway, or if that was...
It could be a J.J. Abrams particular style. It could just be the style of blockbuster filmmaking today. But it's just different. But Rey's theme definitely, I think, is the standout piece of that soundtrack.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's important because I think she's definitely an important character, so good for them for having another solid theme. I got a couple more.
Let's talk about yours then.
Okay.
We've actually talked about all of mine except number one.
Oh, great. Well, I just want to give a quick nod to the Cantina Band.
Oh, yeah.
Because I hope that's not number one.
It's very Zack-style music.
It is. That kind of a jazz-based style. But actually, it's the second Cantina song. Everyone knows the first one, obviously.
Yeah,
I like
the second
it's
one.
called. I found out what the name. Each of those tunes have a name. The second one is called Dune Sea Special.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they have names according to. This is on Wikipedia.
Man, that's on my version of the soundtrack. It's just Cantina Band number 1 and number 2.
Right.
But maybe he had names for them originally.
Yeah, I have here Dune Sea Special, and then the original Cantina song that everybody knows is called "Mad About Me." Apparently.
Okay. Hey, I learned something.
There you go.
Yeah.
I taught Alex Reed something.
The Cantina Band, it's fun music because, for one of the things that we don't really know watching Star Wars today is how is all of the brave creative choices that were made back in 1977.
Right.
And the thing about it was a sci-fi movie, so you kind of come expecting to see monsters and aliens.
Yeah.
So audiences at the time, you see robots, droids, humans, but you don't really see aliens until that scene in the Mos Eisley Cantina, where suddenly, here's a bunch of aliens, but they're not attacking people. They're hanging out at a bar.
Yeah, it's just casual.
Yeah. It's one of those fun, quirky, creative choices that we don't appreciate as much today because it doesn't look as weird to us. But at the time, and having a bunch of aliens standing around playing jazz was also something that had never been seen before.
It's really catchy music, and it's just kind of funny how it wasn't really necessarily meant to be the center of attention, you know, but it just kind of is one of those things that somehow, like everything else about the movie is, you know, so memorable that this is also, the Cantina Band is also
it also stands on its own as music.
Yeah. It's highly contrasting to everything else that you hear. You hear so much like big, powerful orchestra, heavy percussion, you know, brass and all that stuff. It's nice to hear something that's quite laid back, to be honest. Like it's very casual, fun. So that really just gives another dynamic to the movies and to the franchise. Really, just kind of that. It's just a different angle. Like Star Wars can be, you know, kind of light. It's lighthearted too. It's not so heavy that you know.
Yeah, and
I think that's why it's important.
And the music is also just a little off kilter in just the right way. Like George Lucas' direction to John Williams for that scene was to imagine if some alien archaeologist in the future found a time capsule with like 30s Benny Goodman swing band music and tried to do their own interpretation of it.
Right.
Like it has some unusual instrumentation with the steel drums.
Right,
And,
exactly.
it has a synthesizer. It just that perfect
Yeah.
amount of
See,
alienness.
another part, another instance where the synthesizer, is kind of has a very specific use. It's used very specifically in the movie.
The film
very
nerd
different.
term is diegetic music.
Ah,
Diegetic means it's
hey.
coming from an on-screen source. Hey.
There you go. So I'm pretty much done. Yeah, so I'm down to kind of my. Well,
Number one?
mine weren't really ranked. So go ahead and
Okay.
go do yours.
Well, before I do my number one, I wanted to talk about another piece of music, just because I think it's really clever, and it's from The Phantom Menace. It's Anakin's theme.
Oh,
And
okay.
The Phantom, like the major theme from Phantom Menace is Duel of the Fates. That's the big one that everyone remembers. But you also have Anakin's theme. The thing that does it's really clever is it's a unique theme, but it includes elements of the Imperial March that kind of show how Anakin will evolve into Darth Vader.
Right.
And there's one point like
Some foreshadowing.
yeah, the theme itself is major, but there's a point in the middle of the piece where the melody kind of descends and then it goes dun 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 dun. And it's that little quote
Right.
from the Imperial March. And at the very end, it's been like a pretty bright, innocent theme throughout, but in the last like 30 seconds of the piece, it just gets very slow and very ominous.
Right.
Dun 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 dun. And it's a brilliant way to musically
Exactly.
illustrate how Anakin will one day become Darth Vader. It grabs your ear too. That one moment where it just gets minor.
Right.
Dun, 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 dun.
Yeah, isn't that interesting too? How just like there's like one moment in a song, like however great the song is, there's always one, even in your like your whatever your favorite song is. There's that one moment that really grabs you, even though there's technically each song has like a hook of some kind, whether it be melodic or rhythmic or something like that. Everyone seems to like there's like certain moments in songs where I'm like, it's just like 2 like milliseconds of something that happens that
Yeah.
like you can't wait to hear that.
You always seem to hear it.
Right.
Just waiting for that part in the song.
Yeah.
Well, I can go on to my number one pick now.
All right, drum roll.
Well, I'm actually kind of cheating for my number one pick, but I think it's justified because for a previous podcast, Zack picked the entire Aladdin soundtrack as one of his picks for the top Disney songs.
See, he is a fan. I
Yeah.
appreciate that.
So my number one pick is the entire final half hour of the Empire Strikes Back soundtrack.
Oh, okay. All right.
So this is the music all the way from the carbon freezing scene all the way to the end of the movie.
Oh,
And-
yeah. Okay.
Like this is one of those instances. What we talked about how Force Awakens, the music is different for Force Awakens because it's a different kind of movie. And I think if it's a better movie, it produces better music. And Empire Strikes Back is my favorite Star Wars movie. And this climactic third act of The Empire Strikes Back, John Williams just delivers some of his darkest, most epic music across all of the soundtracks.
I agree. Because that's like a cliffhanger of a movie. So like that's
and as far as themes go, there are a lot of little themes just in that half hour of music that are heard nowhere else. Like Boba Fett has a theme. There's a little motif for when Luke is hanging off the bottom of Cloud City. And one of my favorite parts is actually your brother Alex pointed this out to me when we were listening to it, is right after the moment when Darth Vader says, "I am your father," John Williams uses the tritone to illustrate just the horror and the evil of this moment.
Yeah.
And I guess for people who don't know what the tritone is,
It's very different. It's known for its dissonance.
Yeah. One of the most dissonant chords
Yeah.
that you can find.
Right. Or intervals specifically, because you can use that tritone within certain chords, like different types of chords that have different tendencies of resolution and those kinds of things. But when you hit that tritone and just leave it there, it's very unsettling. So so that's supposed to be a very unsettling scene, obviously. So.
Yeah, and I remember hearing somewhere that actually in medieval times the tritone was banned because it sounds so awful that people associated it with Satan.
So again, like we said, like using certain instruments it's one thing if you have this, very solid music and it makes sense, but whatever instrument is playing it adds that much more depth to what's happening, So using those intervals, tritone and that kind of stuff, really, that's how you put it all together and you have a great.
And I guess So that's one of my what I'm talking about. That whole
Cool.
maybe suite of music at the end of Empire Strikes Back. Probably my favorite portion is
it carries you to the end.
Oh yeah, it
all
has
the way.
it just has a driving momentum all the way through. Probably my favorite portion though is a moment when it slows down, and that's when the Falcon's making its final escape, and Luke's on the Falcon, and Vader is in his Star Destroyer, and Vader is talking to Luke telepathically. At that moment, the music it's been kind of this driving kind of string rhythm, but it slows down.
Right.
And then Luke goes into the cockpit, and he's like, "Ben, why didn't you tell me?"
and
And the music, it just builds and builds into this like horrible realization as all of this comes crashing in upon Luke.
Yeah. It seems natural to do that though too, just from a musical standpoint. Like if you're just listening to this music without watching the movie, you get this sense of, there's points where there's points of rest, there's points
it's
of
this
not
emotional
necessarily resolution, but there's just
Yeah.
where it settles, just for a second, just to you catch your breath kind of
and
a thing.
Kind of come to think of it, that whole piece of music is called hyperspace, and it sort of works the way a verse chorus bridge kind of works in like a piece of a pop song, where I guess the verse or the chorus would be the dun 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 dun, dun the rhythm of the strings, but then the bridge would be this slow section where it slows down.
Definitely.
And then it launches right back into the theme and the Falcon escapes. So there you go. Those are all my top picks.
Great. I love that. Thanks.
Yeah. Do you have a top pick?
I can't say. I guess this might be my favorite. Well, because we haven't really talked about the theme, the main theme, a whole lot. I mean, because obviously it's great.
Yeah.
I don't know how you feel about it.
We've all heard it a million times.
Yeah. It's just. But the thing about the main theme is not just the theme itself, but how it carries you into the movie. And I think, although I don't really like the movie so much, I think the way it goes, the way the theme transitions to the Revenge of the Sith in the episode 3, I think that's the best use of the main theme.
Yeah.
Because in the first movie, I think in most of them, the main theme comes in, it tapers off. After you get the title crawl.
Because Revenge of the Sith is the only movie where it goes straight into an action sequence.
Right. And not only that, not only does it go into an action sequence, but it goes in just really aggressively. It just punches you right in the gut. It catches you off guard. It really catches you off guard.
It does. That was actually one of my backup picks, was the whole action suite of music from the beginning of Revenge of the Sith.
Right.
It has this dark instrumentation.
And like we were talking about, it's like the low brass and the low voices, low strings, even kind of carry this melody. Dun, 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 a lot of triplet. Very militant, like the Imperial March, but a little bit slower and just a little bit more. It's just kind of it's very intense. Like even though it's not quite as quick a tempo, it's just very intense. And I think the triplets kind of carry a lot of that. Because it has to be slow enough that you can get those triplets in there. You can fit those in there. Because it's supposed to be a lot of fluttery stuff, kind of... I almost think of it like fireworks. Like you get that initial explosion, and then you've got like the little... like all the stuff kind of flying out. Just a great... if I had to pick something, I guess that'd be my favorite. Just because that the use of the main theme transitioning into the movie, I think, is great, because I think the transition is as important as the theme itself.
Yeah.
Getting you into the movie, because the title crawl is the same in every movie. So,
it's actually it's different on the soundtrack too than in the movie.
That is true. Yeah, I should have said
in
that.
In the movie, it goes to these two like dun dun dun.
Yeah.
Dun, these two drum hits, but in the soundtrack that's edited out, so it launches straight into the dun. Dun, 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 dun. Yeah. Even if you don't like the prequels, that I think it's an absolute crime that we still haven't had complete versions of the prequel scores released. We've had the special edition releases with the complete original trilogy scores, but for some reason we only have the one disc versions of the prequel scores.
And I think that the music, like I said, the music is just as great in those movies, even though Star Wars: The Phantom Menace was the worst.
We had to slip in Mr. Plinkett sometime.
I wish it was more natural than that, but
Star Wars: The Phantom Menace.
I should post a link to some of those
as
well. Nobody knows what we're talking about.
Yeah,
Tell him about Plinkett.
It's an internet reviewer who reviews the prequels, and his reviews are pretty much as long as the movies, but he reviews in character as a 115-year-old serial murderer.
Who makes pizza rolls and
yeah. I think it's a clever twist on fan reviewers on YouTube are a dime a dozen, people complaining about movies, but the fact that it's in character.
But not just that, it's like these reviews are so accurate, and there's just so much attention to detail, and it's
well
actually
edited too.
It just kind of disguises itself with a lot of there's a lot of fluff in there. But
yeah. Okay, here's the point where I say I actually enjoy the prequels. I know, but the thing is, I enjoy Mr. Plinkett's reviews too, so I can enjoy the reviews savaging the prequels,
right?
While I still kind of enjoy the prequels too.
I mean, Star Wars is Star Wars. I don't care who you are.
Yeah.
And we've played, I think a lot of my love of Star Wars just comes from the video games, to be honest.
Oh, me too. Love the video games.
And hearing that music, especially in the Clone Wars game and like Battlefront and all those, like you get the original music.
It's kind of an interesting subtopic, actually. Like I won't spend too long on this, but in the early days before the CD-ROM came out and you could actually have enough file size to store the actual music, composers would write MIDI scores for these games that would include their own themes, like the first Dark Forces game, and that would have original music and kind of remix John Williams music. But then when the CD came out and you could have the actual music, the video games started using the soundtrack in various ways. And actually, there's an interesting, if you just want to hear more Star Wars music, the video game Shadows of the Empire had an original soundtrack written by Joel McNeely. And it's an interesting soundtrack.
He's a great writer, too. He's another one of my favorite writers.
Parts of it are kind of like the score for a movie that never existed. So it's kind of weird listening to it. But some pieces really stand on their own, and they were used in the game well. Like Xizor's theme, that's Xizor, which I know you wouldn't think Xizor when you saw that. But Xizor's theme, he's this reptilian villain who presides over this galaxy-wide shipping company, and his theme is just reptilian. It starts with a snake sound.
Oh yeah,
and it's
like
loud
rattling.
And it's scary, and I think it's on par with the Imperial March, to be honest.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so that's kind of if you're interested in more Star Wars music, that's a fun side soundtrack to seek out. The Shadows of the Empire soundtrack.
Cool. I like that. Yeah, there's lots of great stuff coming out of it. Like that's just the foundation. We really just talked about the foundation, but there's all this other stuff that you can expand upon, and we'll see even more expansion in the new.
Well, we're gonna see many more Star Wars scores, that's for sure. Now that we have pretty much one movie a year coming out.
Yeah.
Who wrote the music for Rogue One?
Michael Giacchino.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he did a great job.
He's done a lot of diverse kinds of work too. Like, he did the music for Up, but he also did the music for.
Yeah, he's associated with Pixar. Definitely.
Yeah, Pixar, but he's also done J.J. Abrams' Star Trek movies.
Star Trek. So that's probably why he was. Well, no, because Rogue One's not a J.J. Abrams, was it?
But still,
but
I'm sure he has a say in
the
it.
Circles. They have their circles and stuff.
Yeah, but just to say that he has a broad range as a composer.
Yeah, and definitely what he did in Rogue One was he was fantastic about holding true. He was very traditional with John Williams and with his with the orchestra, but there are some times, especially early on in the movie, we get a lot of, especially with new characters being introduced, there's different ways of approaching those characters. Like just the very beginning, like maybe the first 20 minutes are kind of the theme again, like the theme for Rogue One, the main theme is close to the original theme, but it's just different enough that it has its own identity, really. And then even as far as the underscore, like certain scenes, certain action sequences, there's certain voicings, certain chords and things that he uses to create tension that I'm sure John Williams could do. He could use those ideas, but Michael Giacchino just still has a little bit of his own take on it. So he really, it's critical as a composer to conform to what you're doing, whatever your project is, but also to have your own voice. And I think he has his own voice.
Yeah.
when it comes to all of his movies. And God, look, just looking at all the Pixar stuff, every Pixar score sounds
they're all very different types of movies.
They're different types of movies, but he's very authentic. He also did the music for Doctor Strange recently.
Yeah.
And that was one of the more memorable Marvel scores, and we've talked about this before too. How Marvel movies don't have necessarily the strongest music. He wrote different. All of his themes and everything he wrote changed. He morphed them to fit whatever the setting was, whatever the scene was, because they shoot in different locations, and it's the score reflects that. So yeah, Michael Giacchino is definitely as a composer that really nobody seems to talk about. Everybody talks about the
Hans Zimmer,
Danny Elfman and Hans Zimmer, and so Michael Giacchino is a big deal in the composing world. So.
Maybe it's because he tends to blend in more with the movies he does.
Probably.
Like for someone like Danny Elfman, who has a very distinct style that you can parody and that is easy to remember, whereas Michael Giacchino, like I said, he blends into the movie he's doing.
Man, that was
it was a fun conversation.
Yeah. Thanks, Alex. Thanks for coming in and talking about. See, I knew I had met my match when I brought you in here.
Aha!
He knows not just.
I've defeated you, sir. I'm definitely not. I'm not a musician like Zack is, but
but your
listened.
Perspective though, it's nice to have you do understand music though, and as a filmmaker, you know how that music is supposed to work.
Yeah.
Or how it can work. There's not one right way to do things, but.
And what I love about the Star Wars soundtracks is how well they tell the story just by listening to them.
Right.
Like when George Lucas, one of his directions to John Williams, at least for the movies that he worked on, was to score it as if it was a silent movie, as if it was just the images and the music telling the story.
Definitely.
So that's part of what makes those scores so strong, I think.
Alex, I appreciate your input, and it's nice to have some. We're definitely going to be doing more of this stuff again.
Let's do this again sometime.
We'll be doing some Star Trek and stuff too, so I can't wait to hear what you have to say about that stuff. That I'm going to have to do a little more research on, because Star Trek is not quite as familiar to me as. But good luck with everything. You guys look forward to Deviant.
Yeah, at Deviant Movie is our hashtag on Facebook and Instagram.
Cool. And web series and all that stuff. Alex is, he's got a lot going. So I'll provide links too in the episode description for all this stuff. Also Plinkett, all that stuff we've talked about. So I think that's it. Alex, thanks once again for coming on, and I look forward to having you on again to geek out some more. This was really fun.
Geek out. Yeah. Thanks for having me, and thanks for listening, everyone.
All right, and moving on to my other special guest for this episode. We go way back, one of my best friends, all the way back since we were 9 years old. And this is my first out-of-state guest, ladies and gentlemen. This is my first guest that's visiting from another place, and I'm so happy to have him here. He used to live here, but not anymore. And
move on.
It bums me out, but but that's okay. This is my friend Tim Valentine. Hello.
Hello.
How's it going?
Pretty good.
We just saw Star Wars, so we're going to talk about that. Spoiler alert, coming up here in pretty soon. But
big time spoiler alert.
Yeah. We're going to basically talk about everything. It's just going to be not really music at this point. I think we're just going to, since you're here, we already talked.
The music was pretty variant from most Star Wars films.
Yeah, if you want to talk about it, we can. But yeah, so Tim's from Texas, or Tim's visiting me from Texas. Oh, you're from Texas originally, though.
Yeah.
So yeah, you've been back and forth. So, yeah, it's good to have Tim here for a little bit. He's just visiting and hanging out for New Year's Eve and all that stuff. So, yeah, Tim's in welding. We used to be in band and stuff together, but
oh yeah.
Yeah, but
Still
now
got the trumpet in the closet.
Yep. We've obviously gone some different directions. Tim's working for Caterpillar right now, and he's doing welding, and just figured I'd, give you a little bit of info about him, even though he's not a musician anymore. Well, he still can sing and all that stuff, but
I pick up the guitar here and there.
Yeah, it's all good. Gotta have music in your life somewhere, right? Even if that's not for everybody, but yeah.
Even if you're not that great at it, you gotta have something.
Yeah, totally. The funniest thing about this whole podcast is like Tim had no idea that I was doing this. So like when I told him I'd like to have him as a guest, he kind of was like, "What?" I remember.
He confused me greatly.
Yeah, he didn't know. So this is probably as big a surprise to him as it is for all of you guys out there. So, cool. Well, man, I'm glad you're here. So, okay, at this time, spoiler alert, because we are just going to talk about Rogue One just for a little bit here, just to cap off the show. And so, like, basically, initial reaction was that it was a great movie, right?
Oh yeah, it's definitely a must see.
Yeah.
Like, if you haven't seen it, definitely go see it. And I'm sorry for the spoilers.
Yeah. There's just so many great things about this movie. Music and beyond, there's just so many great things about it. And I saw it for the second time. It just you always get more of an appreciation for it seeing it the second time. I felt like the beginning of the movie was pretty boring the first time I saw it, but
and then it grasps you and just locks on.
Yeah, just by the end of that last half hour, you're just like, your mind is just blown. But seeing it the second time, I think even the beginning is good. I just feel like when you do exposition for a movie, and like I feel like there's a more creative. They could have been maybe a little bit more creative with, getting that information to you, getting their information to the audience. But that's why I'm a musician. I'm not like a film critic, although I like watching that kind of stuff on other reviewers and see what they have to say about stuff like that. So, but I really think it's pretty great all the way around.
It was really great all around. It like you said, it was pretty boring right at the beginning.
You
You're sitting
thought
there
so
going,
too.
okay,
Yeah,
hold up. And then after about halfway through, it just kind of like grabs you and you can't move. You have to sit there and you have to watch it.
yeah. It just seems to build and build to the very end, and just
then the ending is you're just like, oh, I don't have a brain no more. Everything I thought was just backwards.
right. So you thought that it wasn't going to be like a basically episode 3.5 kind of.
It's exactly what I was saying at the end of the film. Like, this isn't episode 8. This is episode 3.5.
Yeah.
There's no way, because it was a complete prequel to 4. It's insane.
It's gonna be interesting having one Star Wars movie a year from here on out, I guess.
I was wondering how the heck they were going to do it. Now I guess I see how they're going to do it.
Yeah.
So it's
cool.
It's very interesting. Because I was under the impression it's like they're going to make one a year. They can only have so many ideas to keep it going.
Right.
And then they're like, oh, we're not going to keep it going for X amount of time. No, we're going to go back and make just more prequels and information on the other characters.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, cool. So
right. I think that's a great idea. I think they're smart about it, even though it's basically a money machine at this point.
Pretty much.
But yeah, so what would you say your favorite part was?
Oh, geez.
There's just great action. We've been playing since Tim got here. We've been playing Rebel Strike, the old and
GameCube game.
Right. Alex Reed and I think touched on it maybe a little bit. How that music is so repetitive that it just all that old music just seeps in, and the music's different in this movie.
It touches with the same kind of key point notes.
Yeah.
It has the same tone, but it's the way they introduced it and the way that they recorded it.
Definitely, yeah.
It's definitely had a different off-putting tone.
You mean the music? I feel like the whole movie kind of has that. Like they did a really good job of like doing fan service. Like you got some cameos and some characters in there, but at the same time, it's its own thing.
Amazing.
Yeah, right.
Like it looked
Great
like they had a
cinematography.
GoPro just strapped to an X-wing. And you're just flying with them.
That's true. So we've been, playing the video games. That's how we've come to, really appreciate and love the franchise. And I think just that last half hour, that's the kind of action you want. That's exactly what you want in a Star Wars movie. And I think they really delivered. And it's just so cool to be, playing the games and then to just go into the movie and we're like, whoa,
especially not fully knowing what that movie has in store for you.
Right. I was so excited because I was the only one in the group of us that saw the movie tonight. I was the only one that had seen it already. So,
because for those of you who don't know Rebel Strike, you're playing episodes 4 through 6.
Right.
So,
and like the cooperative, like we've been playing co-op, and it's basically taking Rogue Squadron, I think, right, was this episode 2 or the second game. It was the first for the GameCube because they had made a Rebel Strike for the N64. But then and then you had Rogue Squadron, which is you're playing it now as a co-op as two people from the second video game, and then Rebel Strike is all 3 movies basically rolled into one, or mostly 5 and 6.
Yeah, mostly 5 and 6. You start at the end of 4,
right?
With blowing up,
which is pretty cool. But man, all the same ships, all the same stuff is in it. It's just so cool. It just does. The music though, it does feel like, even though the music was very good, it's just different, and it makes you want to hear the old stuff.
It kind of does.
That's just me. That's just me because it's nostalgia.
That's almost because it's leading up to a prequel where that is the music you had.
Right.
So you kind of want to gravitate towards, well, this was how it was. So you don't want this new weird stuff being thrown in.
Right.
When that's just the modern age.
To me, I actually think that some of the cameos were great, but then I think some of the cameos were really odd. Like, I really don't think C-3PO and R2-D2 needed to be shoved into the movie. It was good to see them, obviously.
They had one little part, and it was just like, really?
Yeah, it's like, of all the things that they could have done.
It was like a small comic relief that just didn't need to be there.
Yeah, right.
So
yeah, it was just kind of, I thought that was oddly
yeah.
placed, and but then again, I didn't make the movie, whatever.
and we're not qualified movie critics. It's just our opinions.
Yeah,
so.
it's our opinions. That's same with the music though. It's like, I am a musician, but I still, whatever I say about the music in anything is just my opinion. So
right.
I mean, yeah.
It was still good. I still liked the music.
Yeah.
But it was just a different feel for what was leading up to the original music.
Good. I'm glad. Yeah. It's just missing a little bit of something. You heard Darth Vader's the Imperial March theme in there a little bit.
Once he, starts coming out of that, I guess, bath tube or whatever the heck they had.
the bath chamber.
That's what I'm calling it.
It's like, is that how we take baths in the future?
Standing up in a full thing of water with a gas mask,
right.
I guess.
Everything about it was so... that's a good point, though, is actually the reveals of everything was just so awesome.
And it was cool because, in episode 3, when they leave off, okay, Anakin's Darth Vader, just from watching episodes 4 through 6. But they leave off with Anakin, pretty much sort of being assembled, but not really.
Yeah,
Darth Vader.
Becoming Darth Vader.
But they don't really show just how...
what he can do.
What he can do, and just how he really survived his burns.
Right.
Because you see him peeling off all the dead skin and plating him up. But... yeah. You don't realize that tube he's in is the only reason he's alive.
Right. So it's the holy bath tube.
Yeah.
I wish I had one of those. Yeah, right. Took the words right out of my mouth.
And like Alex said when we were at the movie, 'cause our previous guest, he was with us as well. He said he had never been more terrified of Darth Vader in his whole life.
I would agree with that. Like,
you
really got to see him do stuff. Yeah,
raw power of Darth Vader,
and like a fear. Like, you actually, there's fear. Like, for the guys, like, they're just trying to escape. And at that point, the music is like, you've got the big choir going on, and and with the theme still Darth Vader's theme, but it's just like so big and like really nasty and just really terrifying, almost like a horror movie kind of.
It pretty much was a horror movie.
Yeah,
especially for all the guys
point.
That died.
Yeah, they just got wasted. But that's what you want to. That's what I wanted to see, though.
For Darth Vader, that's what you expect.
Just like, and it goes perfectly into episode 4, I think, and
it flawlessly actually. The way they tied that up was perfect.
I would have been more impressed with the ending if I hadn't already seen. They already basically did it that kind of ending with Skyfall. You remember Skyfall?
Yeah.
For James Bond, because they kind of brought it back to the beginning after that movie.
Yep. Which doesn't really match for James Bond because of so many different actors playing Bond.
Right. I guess so. It's maybe not exactly the same. I mean, if they had the CGI, with the CGI faces with like Leia and Tarkin,
yes,
it would have. They could have pulled it off. But Skyfall is when was Skyfall? Like 2012 or something like that. I can't remember when. 2013 maybe.
2013, I think.
Yeah.
I believe.
So I would have maybe been a little bit more. I already was blown away by the ending, but I feel like, oh yeah, like it reminded me of Skyfall at the end of that. I was like, oh yeah, that's right, they did that.
It's been a long time since I saw Skyfall.
Yeah,
and I own it.
I was actually while I was watching the movie, I was thinking about James Bond and kind of like the like while Star Wars has this huge future, like a movie a year now, the certainty of James Bond is kind of up in the air. Like, what's going to happen with that franchise? So, I was just thinking about that during the movie, but I'm glad Star Wars is going to be around. So.
Oh yeah, Star Wars is apparently just never ending because very first episode 4 aired way back, what,
1976 or whatever, yeah.
So yeah, Star Wars is forever.
Yeah, or 77, something like that. Yeah, Star Wars, I think it'll be around for a while, and I'm good with that.
Especially if Disney owns it, it's forever.
Right, it's good. It was a good movie, and
great movie.
A lot of great, and again, like just great reveals. I even liked when they're trying to jump to hyperspace, like the rebels are trying to escape. They've got the plans, but then the Star Destroyer just comes out and it comes out of hyperspace.
Literally obliterates everything. And of course, during this whole scene, all I can think about is Rebel Strike. Yeah. Watching the frigate get torn to pieces. Awesome. I'm like, oh, mission flawless.
Your main objective in almost every Rebel Strike mission is to protect. Or Rogue One mission, for that matter, is to protect the medical frigate.
The medical frigate and the
which is that weird
ships.
Shape. It's that weird one. They're all weird shaped ships.
You got transports that look like pills, and then you got the medical frigate, which.
What does that even look like?
The medical frigate is.
It's like two separate pieces, kind of with like a long
two pods with a long twig between it.
Yeah,
that's the only way I can really describe it.
And you got to protect that thing. And it's just so fun to like watch them and. Really, just to see the rebel fleet and like all its glory, fighting the Empire. It's just so cool. All the ships seem like are useful. Like we hate being like the Y-wing because in the video games because the Y-wing is
it's purely a bomber and that's all it's used for.
It's really slow moving, but in the movie it's really great. It's like you see some bombs and then they disable the Star Destroyer. With the ion guns, and it's just like that's exactly what you do in the game. It's so awesome.
Not as cool as what they did it.
Yeah, I guess it was a little bit.
It was way cooler the way they did it in the movie.
It was way cooler. Let's be honest.
It literally shut down the whole Star Destroyer, and the Star Destroyer just goes. Instead of just we're gonna disable these 3 individual spots and then blow it up from the bridge. No. No. And another thing about that movie is, when I go into it. Thinking it's okay, episode 8, we're continuing. I went through 3/4 of this movie thinking that that's what it was.
Oh, right.
And I was really confused.
You didn't realize it.
Okay, hold on. Is this like some size?
Yeah, Kevin asked me during the movie, he asked me if it was between 3 and 4, and I was like, yeah.
And then it wasn't until really that they were on the Razor ship.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And you see Leia, and then I'm like,
then it hits right.
Oh,
yeah!
dang.
It hits you all at once. Really,
it's really like, does.
Oh wow!
Because you're sitting there, and you're thinking like, yeah, this might be a prequel, but at the same time, you're like, but it can't be.
Or is it just like maybe an alternate story? Like it could have happened. This way. Who knows? Yeah.
And so it really.
I think it's just going to be all these movies in between, like the regular 7, 8, 9 of Star Wars. I think there's going to just be backstories to everything else. So
that's the only way they're going to be able to keep it every year.
I'm fine with that, I guess. I mean, it's like Marvel. We see several Marvel movies a year, so I mean, why not?
Yeah, upcoming Logan.
It is. Yeah, it is a little bit sad that it's just like total mass marketing, and it's just like they're all money machines now. Like movies have sort of moved away from the art.
A little bit. They keep it, but at the same time they don't.
Like there's very artistic things happening, especially with CGI. We saw it in this movie. You
almost couldn't tell that it was CGI. That's how good it was.
On the faces, yeah. But I mean, like that's become second nature to us. Like we're so used to seeing that kind of crazy special effects and all that stuff that we're really craving story and like something meaningful. I kind of teared up a little bit at a couple of points in the movie because, I mean, that's just kind of nostalgia because it was. you can't recapture the magic of the original movies,
No.
but you can at least, sort of keep that alive, like
yeah.
keep that tradition going. It just seems like so many movies nowadays are just like, it's like, come on,
Yeah.
But this was a really good, I think, movie to put in between 3 and 4, and that's very hard to do without pissing a lot of people off. So
And the great thing is it was totally different from the first 3 episodes.
Right.
Like episodes 1, 2, and 3, which we all know were
yeah,
kind of disappointing.
yeah, and you still need to
So-
see the rest of the Plinkett reviews of those.
Oh,
Tim
God.
watched when he first got back to Colorado. We watched the Phantom Menace Plinkett review. So again, I'll put links in the description for all that stuff. But
Oh.
yeah, definitely need to. You need to watch that if you haven't. So, and Tim's got to watch the rest of them too. So,
Yeah, this is going to be a long, painful night.
yeah. Oh, we're gonna do them tonight, are we? Okay, that sounds good. I'm down for it. Well, we better get started then. We better get off of here and get to it.
guess
So, okay. Well, Tim, thanks for coming and visiting me in Colorado, and thanks for being on this show.
No problem.
It's good to see you, and hopefully sooner than later we'll have you back on to talk about some more stuff.
I will hopefully be here sooner than later. I'm not going to wait another 3 years.
That's right. Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Yep. And thank
And-
you for having me on the show.
Yeah, you bet. All right, guys, that'll do it for another episode of The Soundtrack. I'm Zack Demas. I'm your host, and thank you guys so much for listening. I hope you had as much fun listening to this episode as I had making this episode. This was great. I got schooled by Alex in all things Star Wars and Star Wars music, and it was great to have my friend Tim on as well. Hey, if you enjoyed this episode and you want to hear more, please subscribe via iTunes. And also, I'm on TuneIn now. You can listen to my podcast on tunein.com. You can go there and search for my search for this show. And also become a supporter on Patreon. I've got great rewards for anyone who would like to toss a few bucks my way, and I would really appreciate the support so I can keep making great episodes like this and make even better episodes. And the last thing I just want to say is Happy New Year. I hope you have a Happy New Year, and I hope the next year brings you a lot of great things. I can't wait to start off the 2017 campaign of this podcast with, in the midst of all the Star Wars stuff that was happening this month, in the month of December, another cool thing happened. Nintendo released a little thing called Super Mario Run, and so I think on my first episode of 2017, I figured it'd be a great way to kick off the new year with. And I haven't done a lot of video game stuff yet, so really hardly any. So I'm going to talk about the music. I'm going to talk about the music of probably the most iconic character and series that Nintendo has, is Super Mario. I'm going to talk about my favorite music from that, I think, and I'll have a surprise special guest, and I really can't wait. I think 2017 will be off to a great start. So everyone have a Happy New Year. And actually, one last thing I just want to say. I just want to say, may the Force be with you to Carrie Fisher. She passed away before I was able to finish recording this podcast, so I just wanted to offer my condolences to family and friends of Carrie Fisher and all of you. I know there's a lot of people that were really touched by her, and they had a great impact on her, or she had a great impact on a lot of you out there. So I just want to say, Carrie Fisher, may the Force be with you. We're thinking about you. And all right, take care, everybody. Happy New Year.